Let me tell you about four people. Sarah is 64, a dedicated school administrator in Atlanta who followed every rule, built a perfect life on paper, and now realizes her retirement date is moving backward every single year. Jason is 46, a project manager who hit the six-figure milestone a decade ago, yet feels more financial anxiety today than he did when he was earning half as much. Maya is 32, a graphic designer who traded the dream of homeownership for a full passport and artisanal experiences, only to realize her memories won't pay a mortgage she can no longer afford. Finally, there is Leo, who is 22. He is the most financially literate person in his family, spends his nights watching index fund tutorials, but just spent 3 weeks' worth of savings on a tech setup designed specifically to look successful on camera. 4 different people, or different generations, and 4 completely different bank accounts. Every single one of them fell into the exact same trap. It isn't a similar trap, it is the exact same trap, just wearing different clothes depending on the decade you were born. By the end of this, you'll know which version you're living right now. Here is what the trap actually is. Before I name it, I want to be clear. This has nothing to do with being bad with money or a lack of personal discipline. Most of the people who fall into it are actually quite careful. They budget, they work hard, and they think before they spend. The trap is much sneakier than a simple math error. At some point in every generation's story, the world around you defined what doing well was supposed to look like. It might have been a specific kind of home in a leafy suburb, a certain arrival lifestyle, or a curated set of experiences. Without anyone ever sitting you down to explain the rules, you absorbed them through osmosis. You saw what was celebrated by your peers, what was admired in the culture you grew up in, and what your parents pointed to as success. When you finally reached a point where you could afford to live that version of success, you took it. It didn't feel like a reckless splurge. It felt like the natural, responsible next step in your progression. This isn't about greed or carelessness. You were simply following the unwritten rules your generation handed you, rules that nobody questioned because everyone around you was following them too. The most dangerous part is that it never feels like a trap from the inside. It feels like progress. It feels like you're finally arriving at the life you worked so hard to build. But while you were busy maintaining the signal of wealth, the substance of your financial future was quietly being hollowed out. Sarah grew up watching her parents rent. They rented their entire lives. In the post-war era she was born into, owning a home was the ultimate signal that you had finally made it. It was stability, it was status, and it was the American dream wearing a white picket fence. So when Sarah got her first decent job in administration, and the bank approved her for the biggest mortgage she could qualify for, she took it. Of course she did. That was the move everyone made. In the 1980s, that logic actually made sense on paper. Interest rates were high, but property was appreciating, and that house was genuinely going to be worth more. Today, Sarah's house is worth 4 times what she paid for it. By the world's standards, she is wealthy. But here is where it gets complicated. Sarah is 64, and almost her entire net worth is sitting inside the 4 walls she lives in. She doesn't have the pension she expected because of corporate restructuring in the 90s. She has some savings, but nowhere near enough to fund 25 or 30 years of retirement comfortably, especially when you factor in that a couple today needs approximately $330,000 just for healthcare costs. Selling the house means leaving the neighborhood she's lived in for 40 years, but staying means she's house rich and cash poor. The home itself wasn't the trap. The belief that the home was the whole plan, that was the trap. Sarah spent decades maintaining the signal of wealth, the garden, the renovations, the zip code, while underfunding the very accounts that were supposed to provide her freedom. The arrival was real, but the foundation underneath it was full of gaps. Jason's trap was quieter, and in some ways more insidious, because it didn't feel like one massive, reckless decision. It felt like 100 small, perfectly reasonable ones. Generation X came of age during the rise of the dual-income household and the expansion of the professional class. They watched the generations before them and thought, we'll do better, we'll earn more, we'll have more. And Jason did earn more. That part of the plan worked perfectly. But here's what happened. Every time Jason got a raise, and over 2 decades he got several, his life expanded to match it. He got a promotion at 32 and upgraded the car. He hit 6 figures at 38 and moved to a bigger house. As his kids grew, he added the premium summer camps and the annual overseas holiday. Each individual decision made total sense in the moment. He could afford it, and he felt he had earned it. This is called lifestyle inflation, or the hedonic treadmill, and it is the boomer trap wearing a business casual outfit. The problem isn't that Jason spent money. The problem is that his expenses grew as fast as his income. According to data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the U.S. personal savings rate is hovering around 3.6%, meaning for every $100 earned, only $3.60 is being kept. Jason is the living embodiment of this stat. Despite earning more than both of his parents combined, the gap between what comes in and what goes out has stayed almost exactly the same, just at a much higher, more stressful number. At 46, Jason looks financially successful, but the math is tighter than it should be for someone who has been a top earner for years. He is providing the arrival signal of a successful life every single month via direct debit. But he's one job loss away from the whole structure collapsing because he burned his backup plan just to keep up. Now Maya, and look, if you're a millennial watching this, I need you to hear this first. The system genuinely moved against your generation in ways that were not your fault. The 2008 financial crisis wiped out the early careers of an entire cohort right at the moment they were supposed to be building their foundation. That is real. And it matters. Between stagnant wages and the fact that median home prices have doubled relative to inflation since 1970, the traditional path was effectively blocked. But here's the trap millennials walked into. When you can't afford the things that used to signal arrival, a house, a pension, real equity, you start spending on the available alternative. For Maya, that meant experiences. The travel, the 100 dinners for 2, the concerts, and the convenience services like food delivery, which grew 10.2% year over year in 2025. The culture fully backed this move. Every lifestyle brand and Instagram caption told Maya that this was actually the enlightened approach to money, to spend on memories because you can't take it with you. Having an entire cultural movement tell you that this was actually wisdom, that was the trap. It wasn't the benign behavior of enjoying life, it was the substitution of a lived experience for the building of actual assets. Maya spent her late 20s racking up a beautiful, full passport, but at 32, she has very little invested, no property, and a vague anxiety about the future that she manages by booking the next trip. She followed the millennial unwritten rule that experiences are the real wealth. But she didn't notice it was still just a costume, a different one than Robert's or Jason's, but serving the same function of looking like she had arrived while her net worth stayed stagnant. According to a 2025 report, millennial median net worth is only a fraction of what Gen X had built at the same age, largely because they were marketed a version of wealth that disappears once the flight lands. And then there's Leo. Leo is fascinating because Gen Z is arguably the most financially literate generation in history. They grew up with finance content in their pockets. They know what an index fund is at 19, and they talk about compound interest like it's casual conversation. According to 2025 research, they are hyper-aware of the injustice gap and the systemic hurdles facing them. So you'd think they would have escaped the trap entirely, right? Not quite. Gen Z's version of the trap is the most visible one ever created because it lives entirely online. The arrival signal for this generation isn't a house, a corporate title, or even a stamp-filled passport. It is an aesthetic. It's the fit, the high-end tech setup, and the apartment that looks perfect on camera. It's the specific brands that communicate. I have taste, I have money, I have arrived, to an audience of thousands. The cruel twist is that Gen Z is often doing this while simultaneously investing. Leo has a brokerage account. He puts $50 a month into it, and he should be proud of that. It's a real start. But he is also spending $200 a month on items whose primary function is how they look in his feed. The trap for Leo isn't ignorance, it is performance. They know the right language, but they use it to perform wealth rather than build it. They post about financial freedom, while their actual spending habits quietly contradict it. Leo isn't doomed, he has more time than anyone. But the trap is set and waiting. It is the same trap Sarah and Jason fell into, just wearing a ring light and a carefully chosen digital background. They have the most advanced tools in history, but they are using them to curate a digital costume of success, while the actual numbers stay small. Every generation has people who saw the trap and stepped around it. When you look at what they did differently, it is almost always the same thing. They separated the signal from the substance. They decided, consciously, that they were willing to look less wealthy than they actually were so that their actual wealth could grow faster. They delayed the costume. They drove the older car, stayed in the smaller house, skipped a few status trips, and resisted the aesthetic upgrade. They understood that the person saving 4% has a $650,000 cushion, while the person saving 15% has $4 million, a $3.35 million difference produced by one consistent choice. Here's how the escapers handled their specific generational traps. Sarah's version of escape. She would have kept the house but funded her pension as an untouchable priority rather than going all in on a single physical asset. Jason's version. For every raise he received, he would have picked exactly one modest lifestyle upgrade and banked the other half. He would have let his income growth outpace his lifestyle growth. Maya's version. One big trip a year instead of 4. She would have taken the difference and put it into a boring index fund every month without thinking about it. Leo's version. Making the investing the thing he posts about, not the aesthetic. Building the actual number faster than he builds the look of the number. The rule, if you want one, is this: assets first, lifestyle second. Not forever, just until the assets are doing enough work that the lifestyle is genuinely paid for. It's not a complicated move, but it runs against every social instinct we have, which is why even smart people fall into the trap. The escapers simply chose the peace of financial strength over the performance of success. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want you to sit with it. Which version of the trap are you in right now? Is it Sarah's trap, where your entire net worth is locked in the house you live in, leaving you with no liquid margin for the future? Is it Jason's trap, where your lifestyle has expanded so perfectly with your raises that you're essentially rich on paper but broke in reality? Is it Maya's trap, where you've traded long-term assets for a collection of beautiful but expensive memories? Or is it Leo's trap, where you are using the right financial language to perform wealth while your actual savings stay in the double digits? Tell me in the comments. Not to be judged, genuinely, because the first step out of any trap is being able to name it out loud. Once you name it, you stop being a passenger to your generation's unwritten rules and start becoming the architect of your own freedom. And if this hit close to home, share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. They probably already know which generation they are living in. Now, they just need the map to get out.